My name is Brent Mundy, and I work with the product development group inside of Blackboard. And today what I want to do is give you just a little bit of information about a new product that we've created called xpLor. And xpLor is a cross-platform learning object repository. And what we're going to do with xpLor, and what we're going to learn about it, is really the problem space that we were trying to solve when we created xpLor, and also get into what were the different approaches that we took to solve those problems. So one, just making sure we have a shared understanding of what are we trying to fix. And very specifically, and just kind of jumping into the details here, the learning management system, and coming from a learning management system company and having had previous tenure at other learning management systems companies, we've got a very technology-focused view of the way that content is used. And whenever you start looking at the way that content is used within the learning management system, what we find is that the LMS really puts the content into a little box, and then it puts the lid on top of that box. And we commonly call those boxes courses. And the reason why I call it a box or a silo is because there's really not an easy way to get the content out of the course, to share that content with either somebody down the hall or across the world, because the challenges around sharing that content really start coming down to how do you share across different institutions. Even somebody that's using the same learning management system that you have, there's still a difficulty in import and export. Additionally, if you're working with somebody that's using a different LMS, maybe you're using Moodle and someone else is using Sakai, how do you get those two things to talk to one another if you're using the LMS as your authoring environment for creating content? So we're going to get into the details about how to share that content back and forth, but also a bit of conversation about how it's difficult for people to collaborate when creating content. And again, looking at the authoring tools and the authoring environments that we have inside the learning management system, there really isn't an easy way for people to collaborate in a shared space to create resources. The other thing that we're going to look at, and this is the exciting potential around xpLor, and this will become a little bit more evident as we get into the solution, but one of the things that we've noticed from an LMS perspective is that it's hard to get that OER content. I mean, we've been talking about open education repository content all week, but when it comes down to the teacher finding high quality content and putting it in a course and making it available for her students, there are challenges around that. There's difficulty getting that content, finding that content. Some of that has to do with there's no what we call a center of gravity for this OER content. And then there's also difficulty around the portability of getting that content actually in the course so that it can be displayed. Other things we're going to hit on is talk about copyright license and how we've addressed copyright within xpLor. And then if we have a little bit of time at the end, I know that we've got very limited time, but a little bit of a comparison about the approach that we've taken with xpLor as compared to traditional repository systems. But to sum up, where we're at now from a technology standpoint, we're in a world of where sharing and reuse, at best, it involves a number of different systems between importing and exporting, file formats and everything matching up. And there's really a lot of difficulty around that. And what I'm going to show is how we've worked around a number of those different issues. So very specifically, the way that we've done this is to, rather than think of the content as something that lives inside of the learning management system, we've lifted that content out and put it inside of a cloud-based repository. And then that cloud-based repository, we're using a couple of common education technology standards. One is LTI, or Learning Tools Interoperability. The second is Common Cartridge. And the significance between each of those two standards is really twofold. First, all of the different major learning management systems support these standards at this point. So being able to very easily connect xpLor into these learning management systems is very critical around Learning Tools Interoperability, or LTI. So the content is portable. The content is easily accessed in this cloud-based environment. The second is around Common Cartridge. And Common Cartridge really is it's a content specification about how quizzes are supposed to be formatted, the actual question types that can be used within a quiz, pages, links, discussion forms. How do you export those out of one system and move them into another? This is what Common Cartridge is all about. And what we've done with xpLor is make Common Cartridge the natively supported content type. And the reason why that's exciting is because all of this content that instructors have created, all of this content that they have just sitting in their courses today, can easily be exported and moved into this cloud-based repository so that it can be easily shared and remixed and discovered by other people. Talking about the ecosystem here a little bit more, the content that's inside of xpLor currently, we're focusing on two different areas. The first is what we're calling the crowdsourced content. This is the content that I just mentioned, the content that instructors are creating. This is the content that they've had for semester after semester. They curate this content, they polish this content, and in a lot of ways, this is really, really great content. And the problem is, it's locked into a course. So all of the different challenges around sharing that content and making that content discoverable by others is still in play. Other content that we're talking about here is open education repository content. So this is content either natively living inside of xpLor, and again, working with different agencies, working with different groups to bring that content in, or what xpLor can work as is as a referatory to that content. So being able to do something of a federated search, being able to search a number of different OER repositories at once to be able to find and discover that content. So one thing to be very clear about, though, is that xpLor is more than just a repository. This isn't just a file repository where we stick files. What xpLor is, it's an authoring environment. All of those common cartridge content types that I had mentioned, the files, the pages, the quizzes, all of these things can be created natively inside of xpLor and then delivered from xpLor. And the reason why that delivery piece is also important, and we'll see this in just a moment once we look at this from the perspective of a couple different learning management systems, is that the content itself is very uniformly delivered from one system to the next. For any of you that have ever had to create content or deliver content across multiple learning management systems, then you know the pain that's involved in making sure that that content is consistent from one system to the next. Next, xpLor respects copyright. Copyright is something that's built into the system. We work very closely with the Creative Commons to make sure that their copyrights were not only displayed on the resources themselves, but the copyrights are also respected within the system. Because remember, xpLor is an authoring environment. What we also did was make it a versioning environment. So any resource that you find inside of xpLor, and if it has one of those permissive Creative Commons copyrights on it, you can version that resource. And you can version it for yourself, you can version it, put it into a collection, and make that resource available for others as well. So I'll go ahead and actually show some of these things in concept, so that way we're seeing, and kind of taking this maybe out of verbiage and out of words here. So what I'm going to do, where we are right now, and I'm a little deep inside of the learning management system right now, but what we're looking at right now is Blackboard Learn. And what I've done is signed in as an instructor. I'm signed in as myself right now, and I've navigated down into a course. And this is what a lot of times an instructor or a teacher sees on the first day of a semester. It's a blank course shell. And what they need to do is put content in this blank course shell because they're going to be teaching next week or maybe the week after. So if we put ourselves in the shoes of that teacher, our goal is to find content and put it into this course. So what I will do is go through and launch into xpLor. I will test my internet connection, then launch into xpLor. Jay promised me that the internet would hold. Let me try one more time. Okay, navigating back into content. Anybody want to see this from Moodle? All right. So it looks like Moodle is going to play with us. So we'll go ahead and turn editing on. And much in the same way that we would get into xpLor from Blackboard Learn, we're getting into it in a very similar sort of way. If you were a teacher using Moodle, the very common pathways that a teacher would use to create a native quiz. This is where we've layered on the access points into xpLor. So from the teacher standpoint, we're not creating completely different workflows to be able to take advantage of all the features and functionality there. So I'll go ahead and add content from xpLor. And as I'm doing this, one of the things that I want to do, rather than just finding content and adding it into a course, what I'm going to do is actually create a collection. And a collection in our terms really is an aggregation of individual learning objects. And learning objects, again, things like quizzes and discussion forums, pages of content, and maybe links out to other systems. But what I want to do is aggregate content from a number of different areas and put my own spin on it. So what I'm going to do in order to do that is create something called a collection. And the collection, I'm going to, let's say my course is operating systems. And we'll say operating systems. And we'll say this is the beginning course. And I will go ahead and save. So this will be just very basic. And what I want to do is add a couple of folders. And we'll say this is welcome. And add maybe a couple more folders for resources. And maybe another one for videos. So now I've got a collection, but it's a collection of not much. It's a collection of 3 folders. What we need to do is actually find some content and put inside of these collections. And fortunately, inside of xpLor, we've already got some resources that other people have been adding in. And very specifically, something that we have inside of xpLor, and this is kind of exciting because Jarl just walked in. Last summer, we started running MOOCs on our course sites platform. And one of the very first MOOCs that was taught was by a gentleman, a professor at Indiana University named Curtis Bonk. And Curtis Bonk's MOOC was taught on course sites, but all of the course materials were licensed with a CC BY license. So I grabbed those CC BY licensed course materials and I put them inside of xpLor. And now that they're inside of xpLor, what I'm able to do is remix that content, rearrange that content, and what I'm going to do with that content is actually add it into this collection that I just created. So we'll do a search here for Bonk. Again, trust my internet connection is going to hold. Like we're still having some trouble with that. Yeah, our internet's not holding. We'll move on from the Curtis Bonk material because I do see some other resources out here that I want. And in the second set of resources there, this is a community college just outside of Dayton, Ohio called Sinclair Community College. They received TACT grant funding. I believe they were part of the round 1 or round 2 grant recipients. And they've created a bunch of OER content. That content is something that they have added into xpLor and made available. And again, it's something that is very similar and very related to this operating systems course that I'm trying to put together. And what I want to do is take all of these resources and then add them into that collection that I created. So I've got my operating systems. I want to put this in my resources folder, and I'll go ahead and say add. So those resources are now in my course. And the other thing I'm going to search for is one more set of resources. And I'll just do a very generic search for computers. And what I'm going to do is add a filter at this point, because I know that there is a Khan Academy video out there that I want to use. And since the Khan Academy resources are there and things that I can access, I'll go ahead and apply this. And so we'll look at this computer memory space. And I'll go ahead and add that again into that collection that I'm creating. But this time I'm going to put it into videos, and I'll say add. So if I go back to my resources and I go back into my content, what I'm going to see is this operating systems collection that I created. And I can see my missing resources up here, but we also see our resources that we put in from Sinclair Community College that they shared more broadly with everyone. And then also this Khan Academy video down here within the video section. And the exciting thing is after I've created a collection like this, and remember our primary goal here was to actually put these resources into an empty course shell and then make those resources available to a student. So from here, and again, this is within the collection that I've created, I'm going to go back to my add button, and I'm going to say add to courses. And one of the things that xpLor is able to do, since I went from the learning management system to xpLor, and we're using LTI for that connection, LTI passes over context. It passes over the context of who I am, what is my role in the course, what course am I teaching, what institution am I coming from, and we call that the footprint of LTI. And that footprint of LTI, once it comes over to xpLor, xpLor is contextually aware and it picks up on this. So whenever I click on that add button, it makes the assumption I came from this particular Moodle course. Well, probably the default is you want to add these materials back into that course that I just came from. So this is the default, this is what I see here. So this is the course that I did just come from. I'll go ahead and click add from here. And I get a very quick confirmation that these resources have been added to my course. And the reason why this happens very quickly is because what we're not doing is copying all of these resources into the course itself. What we're doing is linking to these resources. And again, we're using LTI as the standard for the linkage. And the reason why that's important is that since the content is inside of xpLor, other people can be linking to it and can be using it. And the reason why keeping that content there and making that link sort of mechanism of accessing the content is important is whenever you start thinking about the way that content evolves over time, the way that people enrich content, the way that they put metadata on content, the way that they version content, this allows for anyone that's linking to those resources to pick up on that new metadata and pick up on that enrichment that has been made to those resources. So I'll go ahead and go into the course and show what this looks like. So I'll click on this Algebra 101. I see that all of the resources have been added into the course here. And we can click on any one of these. I'll turn editing off so we don't see the icon soup that shows up inside of Moodle. So this is some of that tagged content that we brought in from Sinclair. And now what we have is a very easy mechanism for finding content that other people have shared into a shared cloud-based repository. And it doesn't matter if they were using Learn, or if they were using Sakai, or if they were using Moodle, whenever they uploaded that content and made that content available. If they've shared it broadly, and then they've put an open license, and in the case of this content, since it was a tagged grant content, we can see that it does have a Creative Commons license on it. It's just an attribution license here. But if they made this content freely accessible and freely open inside of xpLor and other people can find it, now all of a sudden you can use xpLor as that discovery place and that discovery mechanism for finding content and then adding it into the course. So I'll go ahead and pause there. I know that we've got very limited time here, so I do want to save 5 or 6 minutes here at the very end for questions. Before we do that, one other quick thing is that if you are interested in putting, or either putting content into xpLor or accessing xpLor, testing xpLor out, I will mention course sites. Course sites is our open Blackboard Learn instance where anybody can go create an account, and from within course sites, the same way that you saw me start to navigate, but was hit the login block there. You can go into xpLor from your course sites course and start playing around. All of the content that we just saw, the tagged content from Sinclair, the Curtis Bonk course, all of these things are there and are accessible. So if you want to start playing with these things and start accessing and viewing those, this is an easy way of accessing those and getting into that. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
So once you pull in all of these disparate materials, is there a way to just add a nice style sheet to all of them with some magic click of the button, or?
So style sheet in the sense that it picks up on the LMS's style, like if you're doing some heavy styling there?
Well, let's say the faculty member is doing a little bit more design. I don't know to what extent you can actually get into the HTML, but it would be, or have an external style sheet. So, because it definitely doesn't look very consistent if you're pulling from all of these different places. It doesn't look like your course anymore. So I'm wondering if you guys have addressed that issue, or?
Yeah, great question. And one of the things that we're looking at, and this is part of, we're very involved with IMS and the specifications that I mentioned around LTI. One of the things that we're considering looking at in conjunction with them is that ability to pass style sheets as part of that LTI launch. Or conversely, something that we've thought about as well is doing something where the content, whenever it is brought from xpLor down into the LMS, to pick up on the LMS's base style sheet. So in either of those scenarios, I think the answer would be yes, there would be something that you could do to affect that. The content inside of xpLor, you have full access to an HTML editor inside of it, so you could do any sort of styling that you wanted to for those resources, but definitely acknowledge the point once you start sharing beyond your own context, that styling may not be appropriate.
Right, and more than just pretty, but also functional. So if you're trying to make this deliverable on, you know, a tablet or a cell phone, to make sure that, you know,
The responsive design hooks are as they should be. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Good question. Yes, sir.
When you do the search, what does it key off of to find the materials? And also, when you upload materials, do you have to do anything to make it more searchable for specific?
Yep, great question, great question. xpLor is very search heavy. We took a very search-based approach to the way that we organize content, the way that you find content, opposed to the way traditional file systems arrange things in folders and hierarchies. So we're very dependent on search. Search is something that we're constantly tweaking and tuning. Currently what we're doing is searching against titles, metadata fields, descriptions. We use Elastic as the technology on the back end for actually delivering the search results, and working on actually doing full text indexing of resources as well, to be able to start doing more advanced things and start getting into semantic matching and such. The metadata though, and I think this is an important point, the metadata is searched as part of that. We do support folksonomy tags, so if you want to put any sort of tag on the content itself. Common Core standards are already baked into the site, so if you're focused on K-12, the Common Core standards are already inside of xpLor. And of course that metadata, you saw me do just a very brief searching for the Khan Academy. You can actually use those as filters. So any of that metadata, if you wanted to find something very specific, like I only want quizzes that map into the 5th grade math Common Core standard XYZ, you could put all of those on as filters along with the keyword search and come back with a very specific set of search results.
Okay, great, thank you.
No problem. Yes?
If you want to draw in materials, the materials you're searching for within xpLor are only materials that are in xpLor, is that correct? It doesn't
Correct.
go outside of that to search for materials or to draw in other OER materials. So
Not at this time.
other ones I needed to go separately and bring those into my course.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. We look at a couple of different strategies for bringing content into xpLor. One is for the resources to natively live inside of the system. The other is for us to have awareness of them, and so having an index of resources in other locations. So I think that getting to the periphery of all of the other content that's out there and having awareness of and being able to find it is certainly important. Because in the example of the Khan Academy video that I searched for and found, I think we all know, we're probably a bit maybe above the curve of the typical teacher, being able to go to one of those external sources, find the resource, know that you have to either grab the URL or maybe a special embed code, and then bring that back into your course and do all the special work to make it render inside the course itself. By having that index inside of xpLor, and by having the very simple add button, what we're doing is, with the click of that add button, is provisioning an LTI link and taking care of all of that mechanics and plumbing of connecting that resource down into the course. So it makes it push button rather than I need to go out and find all these different things and find the URLs and put them in.
Final question.
If anybody else has questions,
And I'm happy to stay over too if other people have questions. So yeah, go ahead.
Back to the search and your earlier question about the style sheets. Is there a filter for college? So if you're a larger university, can you first search for others in your university who have put something in there, so that way it just automatically matches the style?
So the style or the search and the scope of the search down to your institution?
Results from your university first.
Great question. And I apologize, we've got such compressed time. Normally what I would do is have a conversation about what we call channels. And channels are that intersection of people and content. And institutions can create channels and make you a member of that channel. And then whenever you perform a search, if you're part of that channel, you automatically get access into the resources inside that channel. So you may be part of A community college system, you're on a very specific campus, and you have membership into both of those channels, both for the system and for the individual campus. But by default, whenever you search, you're searching within each one of those pockets.
Okay, great, thank you.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you, everybody.